you overusing dry brushing in your paint routine? I know I certainly did.
VASCO Toys. Action figure, dioramas, and props.
When I first started making dioramas, I really heavily leaned on dry brushing, and for a long time, it didn't really bother me. I thought my pieces looked good, I didn't have any physical ailments, but eventually it caught up to me, which is what I'm going to talk to you about today. Dry brushing is the process of using a dry brush to apply very small amounts of paint to a diorama, miniature, or other piece of art. In my opinion, it's one of the most widely used painting techniques in the diorama community. And from my own experience and from what I've seen, it tends to be something that beginners rely heavily on as they start to learn how to paint dioramas. The technique certainly has its place. It's great for adding highlights to a piece like what I'm doing here, or adding some age to something if you want to make it look dusty or dirty. But it does have its pitfalls. I am certainly not a medical professional and I'm not giving medical advice, but I definitely did start to feel some physical ailments in my hands, wrists, and forearms that I think are because of dry brushing. And that's because usually they flare up big time after I've just dry brushed a piece. I find that when I dry brush, I basically get a sort of a painful kind of sensation, almost like a pins and needles sensation in these two fingers, specifically this one, and that can kind of radiate, through my hand, and I'll actually also experience kind of some pain in this part of my elbow and also this part here. It kind of depends on the day. I have kind of pain that will show up in different spots, but it usually is triggered by dry brushing, and that could be the way I'm holding the brush, my paint technique needs work, that could totally be the case. But I noticed for me, I will get some tightness in the back of my hand, and that could be because I'm possibly gripping the brush too hard. I definitely have some stiffness in the wrist when I'm dry brushing too much. And I can kind of get some issues in the forearm, both sides of the forearm. What I do to alleviate this is I found a really good self-massage regimen that really loosens a lot of the trigger points and my muscles up, which I think is really good. And I've also, done some exercises to try to strengthen my hands, forearms, and wrists, which has seemed to help me. But I find that if I fall out of those routines with my hands and forearms, that the problem kind of does come back, and it's usually directly after I've been dry brushing something. So just something to keep in mind. And if you've had this problem too, please let me know in the comments. I feel like artists in general usually have issues with their hands if they're not taking care of them properly, and our hands are so important to us that if you have tips on how you take good care of your hands, I would love to know them. It's definitely no fun to have problems with your hands or your forearms when you're an artist and you're painting, but a silver lining to having that problem is it's opened me up to trying other paint techniques that I wasn't using as regularly when I was dry brushing as my primary paint technique. An example of that is this piece here, where I used a lot of washes, and I really think that I got some good color variation on this piece, which you guys can kind of see from this particular angle on this pillar. So I don't know if it would have taken me a lot longer to get to this point before trying all these different washes and things like that, if my forearms weren't hurting me and I wasn't having those problems. But I'm definitely glad that I opened myself up to washes and also to airbrushing. Airbrushing is something that's incredibly new to me. I've only used it on my previous couple of projects, but it's quickly becoming one of my favorite paint techniques. It doesn't bother my hands, forearms, or wrists, and also the paint finish is really hard to argue with. These things look great when they're done. Dry brushing will always have its place, but there is some overlap between what you can accomplish with an airbrush and with a dry brushing technique. You can all expect to see a lot more airbrushing from me in the near future. Let's start out by looking at an older diorama piece that I made years ago when I was relying heavily on dry brushing as one of the main forms of painting techniques that I used in my dioramas. This diorama paint job was completely primed or base coated in black, and then I basically dry brushed red and orange over top of it, which is the result that you get here on these bricks. And I didn't add mortar to the bricks at this time when I was creating these dials. This is probably early 2020 that I made this, and I made several runs of this diorama. You can check out the video for that if you're interested in it. But really, at this point in my diorama creation process, I was heavily relying on dry brushing. So not only did I dry brush the bricks, but all of concrete work that you see here was also dry brushed all the way around. And it was just something that I thought was kind of like the way to go on painting. And it definitely has its place, but this piece really shows how much I was overusing the technique. And I think that if I were to redo this today and use some washes and some other techniques, that I would really have a lot better of a piece that I would be much more proud of than what you see here. In comparison, I want to look at a more recent piece where I utilized a bunch of different techniques, including washes and a little bit of dry brushing. So this is a diorama piece that I finished in the last month or so, and this one has a lot more going on in terms of paint technique. So I used several different washes. I did use dry brushing, but very minimally, just to do some highlights of the orange and try to bring the colors together. But this piece is something that I think looks a lot better than just the dry brushing on black. This one wasn't base coated in black, it was base coated in brown and then painted over that several different shades of orange and red, and I even had some wine colors in here as well. Now, one thing that's true about this dial though is it's not really a one-to-one comparison with what you just saw, because I do have mortar on this throughout the piece, which I think really helps up the quality and up the illusion that this is a real brick wall. So there is that. But overall, I would say I think this piece looks much better as a piece that has several different paint techniques at play with just a little bit of dry brushing when you compare it to something that was completely dry brushed basically from start to finish. Wanted to give you guys an opportunity to see these two in the same shot so that you can tell me in the comments which one you like better. The version that has the washes or the version that has the dry brushes. Now this is all preference, but for me, I really think that the version with the washes is the way to go. And personally, I feel like when I started using washes in my diorama painting, I really felt like I was able to level up, and that advancement really helped me improve the realism specifically of my pieces. And so I just wanted to share this with you guys as something that I think is an improvement. And since dry brushing is something that I think a lot of us learn when we begin our diorama art journey, I think it's something that can be kind of too heavily relied on. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you found some value in it. If you did, please let me know in the comments what you thought of the video and if you've had these problems yourself. Otherwise, I thank you guys for watching. I hope you subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.